I'd like to welcome our first round of presenters. We're going to be talking about sensory accessibility in public libraries. So Quincy, Knapp, and Nicole, Cunha, come on up.
Hey everyone, I'm Nicole, Sensational grad.
Can we make sure that the camera can check the...
Just went out for a little bit. Sorry. But they are seeing the screen.
Cool.
And thank you to Des for getting us started off here.
Can you guys sway the corner to see us okay? If we're, okay, cool. All right.
And if you can't hear us, just let us know. I'm talking to the microphone. Hello.
Okay.
I think it's good. Hello again, Nicole Cunha, Sensational grad.
Hi, I'm Quincy. I'm a current SLIS student. And today we're doing a presentation on sensational spaces.
Disability justice in academic and public libraries. Did start out as sensory accessibility, but we'll talk more about that later.
Oh, I got it easier.
Laser pointing is good. You want me to just use the keyboard?
Yeah.
So for our overview for today,
We have disability, justice, and libraries.
third space,
Sense of physical space.
digital space,
Sensory programming and collections.
and questions.
And then at the very end, we have our works cited and a few links that will still be available for clicking afterwards. So first we have disability, justice, and libraries, and third space. So what is disability justice?
Disability justice, pretty much, is making sure that the world is accessible for everyone. Think of it as you're ambulatory, you can walk everywhere, but someone might be a wheelchair user. The spaces for the wheelchair user are not always thought of until they're brought out to someone and they make changes, pretty much. And it challenges the idea that our worth as individuals has to do with the ability to perform as productive members of society. What is the production? Is it going to work every day? Or is it raising consciousness for disability in the mainstream culture? And that's what we're doing today.
Okay, so traditionally in mainstream American society, I think we thought a lot of disability in sort of a medical framework. And so that's the framework where some individual has some sort of impairment, and then they and their caretakers have to somehow manage this impairment, and they have to do it for themselves, and they and their caretakers must advocate. So something like that in a library might look like, oh, I'm going to go to the librarian, I have an accommodation that I need, and they submit paperwork, and the paperwork is evaluated, and then it may be in a meeting, and then it's approved, and then somehow access is achieved. And this is the frequent medical framework in which we view this sort of disability.
The struggle is real, let's just say that. But instead of thinking of disability in a medical framework, we want to shift it to the social framework and seeing it as the social model is what it's called. So impairment is created by society. If someone is alone, are they disabled or are they not? It's like if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it still make a sound? But Think of it as stairs don't build themselves. People build the stairs. It's the human error that creates society, that creates disability. And then the final point for this, access is just a work to, access framed by social justice and must dismantle systems of ableism that create disability. If I'm not making sense, please ask for clarification.
So as opposed to access, this access has been achieved. Instead, access is a continuing cycle that happens over and over again between people within a social framework.
Not just between people, but between institutions, and we'll get more to that later.
So now we're talking a little bit about third space.
And third space is an area, either in person or online, where people with political, social, and economic influence, or not as much, can create their own power.
Nicole, what are the first and second spaces?
The first space, Quincy, is home, where you live. Second space is work. And third space, you're in one, DERAIL. And this even goes for the virtual attendees. Electronic space is third space.
And so speaking of Elmberg, who we have down here at the bottom, he and his researchers, when he was researching third space, he asked a group of students, what is the library? What is the library to you? What does it mean to you? And one of the great quotations that stuck out was, a place of mild climate where I can find adventures.
And adventures are fun, so why not?
So the question is, how can we make a library space where patrons can find adventures?
That's a good question, Quincy.
So again, let's go back to, let's compare these two frameworks. We have a very traditional framework where coming in from both sides, we might view the library as an institution, right? And so the library hosts materials, and librarians are the interface to these materials. They go and find the materials, match them up with patrons, get the answers. And this purpose, or the few purposes of the library as an institution, really dominates the space. There's not much, perhaps not much wiggle room there. It's funneling patron through regulated spaces or regulated systems that have a few, one or two specific regulated uses. However,
But then you have to think of the library as one institution and the patrons as another. The library is the patron space, and the patrons can take it for their own. So they see the space as their own and with their own power. They create their own purpose and create their space for purpose. And then third space is a place for social strengthening. Think of it as the mall was the third space at one point, but now more and more people are moving to libraries.
so how can the librarian become a facilitator for a patron's adventure to help patrons create their own adventure within the library?
Good question.
So then we get to a sense of physical space. So we're going to talk about physical spaces, basic access. How can we get our patrons in the door and make sure our architecture does not exclude patrons? And also, how can we make it so patrons can seize their own space?
But to get things started, you may have heard of something small called the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're going to just do baseline standards, so bear with us for a few minutes. You have to think of space as a certain amount of area that has signage, large, high contrast, so people in a lot of distance can see it very clearly. Heights of desks, you want to make sure someone who's upright on 2 feet can see above the desk, and someone who might be a wheelchair user, walker user, scooter user, whatever, can also come up. And they have space to come behind the desk, so the librarian can help them. And then white spaces, aisles, doors, walkways, you want to make sure people can turn around.
Okay, and so I noticed that in our sign of that's large and clear and has high contrast, there's also some braille on the bottom. That seems pretty cool.
Yep, and you also have to think that the text and the images are raised, so someone who may not be braille literate can also feel the images and have an idea of where they are.
So this is, and just to be clear, this is our bathroom sign. where we have the toilet on one side and the handicap side on the other, and it almost looks like they're running away from the toilet, but hopefully we'll get maintenance in there.
And then it does say all gender restroom in all caps at the bottom.
So we're going to be taking a closer look at two libraries in particular. One is the Earl Center over at Wheelock College, down the road.
Where we can park.
Where we work. So this is a beautiful, they have these beautiful glass floor-ceiling windows. The outside is all glass, a lot of natural light. And then of course we have our own Boston Public Library. So just the outside, the stone building with these beautiful archways, and as many people know, the inside was very recently renovated and very, very beautiful and gorgeous.
Let's just say the children's room was recently renovated, or that's what we're focusing on today.
Well,
But before we get started talking about the spaces, we have to discuss something called universal design. Again, flexible spaces for flexible use. So in this picture on the left side of the screen, we have the front area of the Earl Center. In the background, you can see the glass rooms that we use for conferences or meetings. And then in the foreground is a seating space with large and small coupes, as we call them, in different colors. They're movable, so people can create the space that they want. The walls in the conference rooms also come down, but that's something else we can discuss later.
Oh, I was just testing that. Oh, I got it. Okay.
And then the other image on the right side of the screen is the art area or wet area of the Earl Center. They have tables and chairs that are movable and lockable, which is also good. And a touch screen in the right side of the image that students can use as a meeting space or play music. They can turn it from a creative space to a study space if need be.
Nicole, what are these weird, like, triangular, rectangular white things in the corners?
Those are movable whiteboards, Quincy. They're really helpful for anyone who has a meeting or facilities if they have to bring them to a different part of the college.
The other cool thing is that these, I've seen a lot of them used, can be kind of like audience bleachers if someone's doing something in there.
And we have a lot of stuff for the theater going on, so they get used a lot.
Okay. So now we're talking a little bit about distinct flooring. Here at the Earl Center, we have some really great distinct flooring. We have these two shelves on either side and this aisle right down the middle. So first of all, these little gel pads are really cool because you can step on them and then they like move the little color around inside. So that adds some nice, visual stimulation. But the other great thing is if you see where they're lined up, they're marking the entrances to the aisles. So if you were standing outside there, you could easily see where the openings are. And if you're navigating by texture, either with your foot or by cane, you can still navigate where the aisles are very easily.
Small interruption, hold on. Or small intermission, if that's the word.
I feel like we should have like little elevator music.
Or Jeopardy, maybe?
That's too stressful.
So, how's everyone feeling? Is this making sense so far?
Yeah.
Are we at least entertaining you?
Oh, yeah. Good day.
Okay, now I have the song that I like to entertain you stuck in my head.
Well, speaking of the Earl Center, I mean, even though the screen's, is the screen up? I mean, even just sort of general areas though, like linoleum for the hallway and then rug for the rest of it, you can start. It's a distinct flooring that will help you feel by texture where you are. So it's a great indicator of space.
And one of our colleagues, who's also low vision, she has ended up not using her cane in the Earl Center because she has known it so well for so long. So she knows if I'm on the rug area, I'm either in the open area or the wet area. If I'm on the linoleum, I'm on the pathway between each area.
Okay, we are good. Sorry, folks.
Okay, back on track.
Woohoo.
Awesome. Thank you, Deb.
Sorry.
Thank you, tech people.
And thank you guys very much for making this possible.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the keyboard. All right. So now we have, let's talk about distinctive flooring in the Boston Public Library. So as we mentioned,
Why don't we just do the keyboard next?
Okay, great. So as we mentioned, the inside of the Boston Public Library was recently renovated. When you walk into the children's room, this is the first thing that you see. You have these 5 wide stripes of different colors, red, purple, blue, green, orange, and they actually lead you, very adventurously, following the Yellow Brick Road, to color-coded areas within the children's room. So this is perfect because as a sort of visual interest and a visual guide, someone can just say, hey, follow the green stripe all the way to, oh, the sensory stimulation area.
And what is that at the end of the green stripe, Quincy?
Oh, it's a rug, so that as soon as you hit this little border and you hit the rug, you know texturally that you're in a different space.
That's pretty cool.
But I wonder if the glare from these lights will hurt anybody's eyes.
That's quite possible, but also a good reason to have more natural light in the spaces you create. Which brings us back to the Earl Center. For a close-up of the conference rooms that we discussed earlier, you can see that a lot of the, or all the walls are glass, so they offer a lot of natural light during the day. But we also have fluorescent lights throughout the center. It's good to note if the fluorescent lights are dimmable, because if anyone with a light sensitivity asks you to dim them, and they have like a great headache for it or something, you want to make sure that's possible to accommodate them as you can.
It's great to have different spaces for different varieties of light within the
Exactly.
library.
But another good thing about the Earl Center and other libraries is that the access process never stops. Again, the glass rooms, when this space was designed 3 years ago, didn't have these stripes on there. But now the stripes are textured, and that way you know where you are in the center. Besides, people could see into the glass room, so it was a lot of privacy. But also, if you notice, there are double stripes on the doors, so you know right where the handle is. And again, making access easy.
Okay. So now let's talk more about integrating sensory into the space.
So this is a little example of one of the ball pits we created. At this point, it's a little baby pool with little plastic balls that you might see at a Chuck E. Cheese's. We had a bigger one, but it broke from all the lacrosse players that want to sit in it, and we could fit about 3 of them in there. But this one fits a turtle or a small service dog. And then the ball pit is an example of something a small or medium-sized library could do with not a lot of budget. But the BPL, because you know it's the BPL, they created a whole space with walls of sensory wall mounts, whether it be squishy balls, gel pads, or different things like that. And they made it visually inviting with different paints. A lot of this is green from what I can see.
So let's take a closer look at one of those panels. So this is one of the panels on there. This green background with these little sort of circular areas. As Nicole mentioned, some of them are gel, some of them are little wooden balls. These blue are actually little bristles, like a little scrubber. They're a lot of fun. So that's a great way to just sort of have this sort of sensory built in. Here's actually another great example of universal design, where you have these cushions sort of free floating in an open area so that patrons can create reading time or maybe a little privacy in the little nook. Visual interest. You've got this manipulatives, these little buckles, you can practice your motor skills. And then this little button is actually a squeaky one. I'm not sure everyone. I'm sure the kids really enjoy that.
But why don't adults?
Yes, and why don't adults? So these are all great examples. Here's our little hedgehog with more bristles. There's no reason. Hmm?
You had a lot of fun with that one.
I did have a lot of fun with that one. It's also really cool because it's in like a down low nook, so kids can literally hide in there and just like play with the hedgehog. But there's no reason that we can't have these textural indicators in adult spaces as well, because not only is it fun, but you can give directions based on it. So say you had this next to natural history or something like that. Instead of saying, oh, you know, it's the aisle way down there and it's, you know, Dewey, whatever, I should look that up. You can say, oh, it's by the blue hedgehog, so visual direction. That's also bristly, so you have textural direction. And once they get there, however they're getting there, that's where they can find all the natural history resources. And that brings us to out of physical space to digital space.
Pretty much from physical to the electronics.
Now, some people have the misguided notion that if you are on a website and it's accessible, it has to be boring. No, it can be very exciting, and there's just a few ways to ensure that all patrons will enjoy your beautiful artwork.
So for the websites, you want to have clear text, again, high contrast, sort of like black text on a white background like we have, or white text on a dark background, like our other slides. And then you want to make sure that you have it visually inviting, but if you have anything like GIFs that you don't want to pose an epilepsy or seizure risk with that, think of it as you want something like BuzzFeed's, where you can pause the GIF if you don't want to keep looking at it. So that doesn't create that wormhole, I guess you could say.
Nicole, do you mean GIFs?
The peanut butter. Is it crunchy or smooth?
Crunchy peanut butter.
But then another easier thing you might think of is captioned images or videos and alt tags. On the right side of our screen here, we have a still of the Earl Center technology page. This is an example I got from a built-in accessibility in Apple. It has the headers, and then at the bottom here it says now in Wheelock College Earl Center Technology window, MacBook Air and iPad 4 image. So it's not giving you a lot of detail of what you're looking at, but it gives you the idea and the context for it.
So is this the alt tag that shows up when you hover your arrow over the picture?
That's one example. It really depends on the screen reading software that you use, built in or not. We'll get more on that later. And then also, that should have an E in the end, the navigate, late last minute editing. But beware of how folks navigate. Headers and links are really good because people can click them and navigate by those things, whether you're searching for articles or something like that. And then make sure that the headers or links read out what you're looking at. Don't just say, click here for this article. Say, clicking on access is not the problem, or access is not problem solving. The titles of what you're looking at.
And then we'll talk a little bit about online tools that you can load onto your website.
Yes.
So here we're going to go back to Wheelock. If you can see this little button right there, there's a red arrow pointing towards this little blue button, and inside the blue button there's a little white figure. That is whenever you scroll up and down the screen, that will always stay there in the corner. So you can always have it with you if you need to click on it. And once you do click on it, it's the Audio Eye Ally and toolbar. So once you start hovering over the tags, it will tell you what they are. And this I'm hovering over is the reader, so you can listen to the entire website, and it will tell you, links and headers, and all that good stuff. But I wonder if there's a way to find out if your website is accessible.
There is, Quincy. Some of you might know this as the WAVE tool, Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool. You can take the URL of your website and add it in here, and then it'll show you what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, and give you a couple of pointers on how to improve everything. But also, the Audio Ally tool that Quincy was talking about is a paid feature. That's great for an entire institution, but you might want something smaller for just your website. JAWS is one that you may know in the library world. That's paid. You can get it through your state usually. NVDA is the free version. These are both window accessible screen readers, but NVDA is also portable. So you can put it on a USB drive and take it everywhere.
Pocket-sized for your convenience.
And then, as we discussed earlier, there's the Apple accessibility, but they have a monopoly on that all around.
Okay. And another really great thing that's and easy to do is to have the icons at the edges of the computer. So that way, if someone is visual impairment might be looking and there's some icons floating around in the middle, instead they can take it and just follow the board of the computer, and then there's sections. Here's the web browsers in one corner, printer in another, all the apps, well, it's not really an app, I guess, Word, Excel, and all that at the top. And this way, again, it's very easy guidance.
So it saves them a lot of time too. But now we're moving back from the electronics to the toys. Sounds like fun, huh?
Okay, so here's a few ideas for manipulatives that you can have in your collection. Manipulatives are just things that you can hold. They can develop motor skills, engage in sensory play. And when you have them in your collection, they defray costs for individual families. So folks can just try them out, see if they like them, buy them or not for themselves, or just keep using the library ones. So here's a few great examples at the Earl Center. You have this sort of teal-colored little rubber ball with little nubs on it, which is great to feel the bumps or to squish. You have these nice sand boxes, big and small, and they have covers on them. They still don't want to shake them too much, but that's wonderful for imaginative and sensory play. And then you have these little square weighted bags, because some people like a little extra weight on their limbs.
They're also great for anxiety.
Oh, I wish I had those last night then.
The presentation's almost done, Quincy. Then we can take a nap.
Well, how do we keep these on the shelves?
That's where these kits come in. These are dark blue mesh bags with clear openings. You put the barcode and the description of the items on the outside, so people can either see the material or read the descriptions. They don't always stay in place, but all the time it's easier. What was I gonna say?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, occasionally you do have to play a little bit of Tetris, but it works out. I mean, everything's off the floor.
Yes, but you can see from the aisles that they're not too obscured.
Okay, so let's talk about makerspaces. That's the key word these days.
Buzzwords.
Yeah, buzzwords. But makerspace is basically just sort of an advanced arts and crafts area. At least that's how I think of it. But the great thing is that when you have these supplies and you have a makerspace that's accessible, has wide areas around that people can move around in, patrons can make their own accommodations if they want to, because they're absolutely the experts in what they need. And so here's just a floating image of a 3D printer. This one is actually only about $300, not that it's an ad or anything. But it's, they can print out just a great variety of stuff. For example,
one thing that we really want to stress here is patron-empowered accessibility and patron-empowered collections. So this example is one that a student at Wheelock created. It's a push button for her service dog. This one in the image is a prototype, so it's a lot bigger than the actual button. It has push to open at the top and bottom of the button. It has the palm middle all raised, so it's easy to read. Has service dogs open doors too. You want to remember for 3D printing, it's trial and error. If it's too big one time, you can do some more measuring. You can go back again. It's a whole process. But having a lot of different versions also gives you more leverage with the administration to give them examples for your presentations, to get the funding, and the process goes on. Remember, measurement is key.
And the button is actually a little texture too, so the dog can more easily, press instead of slippery.
Also, the question is, do patrons have to print things that they make, or do they have to print things that are already made? That's where Thingiverse comes in. It's a really good handy website for 3D printing, and it's community run and collaborative empowerment. So this example that we have on the left side is just a screen for a Braille search of alphabet, or Braille alphabets. And then on the right side, we have a close-up of one of the examples. You can download these templates and change them for what you want, but they're always customizable for your convenience.
Okay. And similarly, just as we have the Braille here, but you can also have the tactile, raised pictures. We have these tactile books on Thingiverse. And so here's a tactile Goodnight Moon. Goodnight clocks, goodnight socks. And over here you have the outline of the clock and the socks, so you have that additional, reinforcement. Okay. So these are just a few of very many examples of patron-empowered accessibility. And that's essentially what this whole presentation is about, letting patrons determine their own path, giving them the tools to see space for their own.
Moving from the librarian as facilitator, or archivist, or cultural heritage person, to patron as facilitator. Because the patrons know what they want, they know what they need, and they need our help to try to get it, sometimes. But questions, comments, sarcastic remarks, remember, this is a third space, safe space, so please ask us anything. Thank you so much for your time.
Can you just repeat the name of the last website?
Thingiverse?
What is it?
Thingiverse?
Thank you.
THINGIVERSE.com.
Oh,
How did you choose these two particular libraries as your exploration, your adventure?
Mostly convenience.
Yeah.
I have to confess.
I mean, our original idea was sensory accessibility and creating more tactile collections, but then as we were researching, I found an article by Alana Kumbier and Julia Starkey, which I highly recommend, about disability justice in libraries. So it kind of went from, how can we put these two ideas together?
Though actually, to answer it even more specifically, the Earl Center is run by our boss, Mayor Parker O'Toole, and she does a lot of stuff with accessibility and access and that sort of thing. And so we actually did have a few more examples, like the hatch, that's part of, I think it's Newton's makerspace. That's pretty accessible, and so folks can have a great variety of supplies that they can use for free and make stuff over there. And then of course there's Gallaudet University, and they have a wonderful deaf space. And so there's a lot of architectural features there where the features are supporting the patrons, and so it's like rounded corners, so you're not cut off vision-wise. A lot of glass natural light.
Yes, so we had one picture where it shows an open area at Gallaudet, and there were different levels, but each banister, I guess you could say, on each level was glass. So someone on the ground floor could talk to someone on the third floor, and you wouldn't be interrupted by moving to a better vantage point.
Yeah, so there's a lot of spaces around and out there.
Yes.
Do you have a recommendation for standards for image captions or resources for that?
And could you repeat the question before answering for our live stream folks?
Yeah, thanks. The question was, are there any resources for looking for website standards and formatting for pictures? Yes.
The image captions.
For the image captions.
Like the description.
For the image captions. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there, definitely. Let me see if I can go back to something, but Nicole, would you like to?
Honestly, I just Googled it and said, what's the best way? But they stress context is key. I believe WebAIM has some strategies for that. There's always the built-in stuff for YouTube. W3C schools, I believe, also maybe have something. Lenda.com.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, as long as you say, you know, it's nice to say also where you are on the page, not just like what the picture is. So if you can say like, oh, this is in, you know, you're still in the Wheelock page, that's something, and then, you know, there's like more to scroll down, that sort of thing. More questions?
Or sarcastic remarks, again, anything you want to say.
Way in the back.
Yeah, what are some things that you think either Wheelock or the VPL could be doing better that they aren't doing now?
I mean, everyone could always be doing something better. I know that Mary and I have talked about the stacks, even though, you know, we've done a lot with the stacks, they're still a little bit dim. So, you know, they could have more natural light there. But it's hard to do because, you know, it's against a wall. So there's just a lot of things that, I don't know.
And then the first thing you may notice at the Earl Center is our, I guess you'd call it circulation desk. The center was originally designed by a man who's 6'8". So for someone like myself who's 5 feet, sitting down, I can barely see over it. So to see my boss, I have to go to the second desk, which is lower, to actually notice her, or stand all day, which isn't always fun. So you want to make sure that you have built-in levels. But that isn't always in the budget.
But the nice thing about the guy who's 6'8" is that the wheelchairs will always fit underneath the desks. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Sorry, I really enjoyed your presentation, so thank you for that. I had a question. I know that you guys focus primarily on architecture, like information architecture, representation in websites, and also just physical architecture. I was wondering if in your research or even walking around the library, if you came across any sort of initiatives towards using these items and using these ideas in programming, especially for children, maybe even for adults.
Well, I know that the BPL has like a kids programming that's all free play, sensory play. So they just have a lot of, I think they have a lot of manipulatives, it's just not in the collection to be checked out. But they do have these sessions of manipulative play that's not guided. And then as far as programming goes, like you could have, you know, 3D printing, you know, lessons and stuff. That's and then mention these as you're discussing that.
I know the mayor has been talking about 3D printer ever since we got one. We've changed hands with the companies, but more and more faculty and staff are integrating them into their curriculum. One of the staff in the comm department has sphinxes that he gives out as prizes. Then another person in the math and science department at Wheelock uses camp, and he has a STEM camp for 8th and 9th graders where they create their own name tags, and then Quincy and I can teach them, and we go through the process of troubleshooting and all that. And as far as integrating the manipulatives into our collection, we have a lot of teachers and social workers at Wheelock, so they bring them into hospitals or into the sessions with the families that they work with. It really depends on what people need.
And sorry, the question was how to integrate all of these items into programming.
Whether it be technology or manipulatives.
Yeah, so I think we're about wrapping up, unless.
I actually have a question. I know both of you folks work here at Simmons College in the library. Can you talk a little bit about what we maybe are or are not doing around these sort of areas? I know that we're not, we have like a different kind of focus from Wheelock Library, but like how are we doing and what can we do better?
So the question is about Beatley Library and accessibility.
Do you really want me to answer this? I will start with saying that for one of my last classes as a grad student here, I did a scan of the library, the physical and electronic space, as one of the assignments, and it turned out from a 10-page paper to 32 with a 22-page appendix of pictures of things you're doing well and not. For example, training. We have the materials, but there's not really any built-in training that we have just yet. I know we are working on that right now. And we are working on also creating a better relationship with the Disability Services Office. Stephanie Hackett and Tim Rogers, they are fantastic people, but they're only two. So we want to make sure that the library can serve our patrons as much as the Disability Services Office does. So we want to offer like training for the college and for our staff.
And I actually, sorry, that's one thing that we did have in the presentation, but training is absolutely essential. From everyone, from the top to the bottom, or sideways and backways, like, because if we have all of these things but nobody knows about them, they can't be used.
If there's one thing I've learned in my couple years of learning more about the disability community and disability justice in general, it's exposure. A lot of people don't think about this because they're not exposed to it on an everyday basis. So it's all about getting people to think about it, whether it be just mentioning, oh, this isn't ADA compatible, to, hey, I can't open this door. If you say one thing, it can snowball into a lot of different things. I know on our campus that a lot of the automatic door openers don't work. And that's being brought to the administration because more and more people are reporting it. So it's little things like that, but with persistence, that will make change. Does that answer your question?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Then we have one way in the back. Bridget?
We have an online question.
Oh, we have an online question. Oh, by the way, so anyone, if you think of later questions, I think there's a method for submitting those questions online that they can be answered later. And of course, our information is available, so you can feel free to contact us.
Tweet us, Facebook, whichever is your preferred method.
Well, I don't have a Twitter, but
You do, you just don't use it.
I don't know where it is.
About your Twitter. How is accessibility for information professionals? What can audience do to make librarianship accessible?
So the question is, what can the audience do, like audiences and the patrons can do to help libraries become accessible?
I think it's as practitioners.
Okay. I mean, I think the best way to do it is self-education. And self-education not just in what stuff can we buy, but self-education in what is the system that we're so used to, that we're swimming around in this system. How can we break the glass and get into the ocean? Like Nemo. You know, like how can we change the mind? And so I think especially self-education, going into the journals. There's a lot of people talking about it, and we have on our handout. Oh, did everyone get handouts? Oh, great. On the back of the handout, there's a lot of activists on there that you can follow on Twitter, or they have a lot of blogs, things like that. And then these are also on the handout, but if the presentation is loaded, these links are so you can just click on them very easily.
But again, really think about your values and what you think, or how your values align with your institution. And self-education, like Quincy said, is key. Don't leave the teaching to the marginalized community. It's making sure that you as a person realizes your own deficits in these biases that you have or have been exposed to, and you work on combating them. I know in my journey as a librarian, I had to accept my disabled identity before really figuring out how to integrate it into my librarianship identity. One thing that I haven't really noticed in the literature is how we can help disabled librarians, because disability is one of the protected categories. So we talk about helping the patrons, but what about helping the staff or our friends? And it's also about self-advocacy. We tell the patrons to be advocates for themselves and have spaces for them, but what about us? So also, in creating the partnerships between the community organizations or the patrons and the librarians or other cultural institutions, it's all about making sure we're all on the same level and that we understand where we are, where they are, and how to meet everyone in the middle. A lot of it is we've talked to each other about these things, but we're not reaching out to the communities that really need these accommodations. So we need to really bridge those gaps in bridging the professions, I would say. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question to end on. So thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you have a great conference.